again. I don't know if you noticed, but I added a little something to my chalk wall. Hard to see, but I did try to draw her face on there. It's the magic finger, day 2. And yesterday we left off right about where we would find out what happened to the Gregg family. Let's see if we can confirm by reading on and what you thought was going to happen is actually what happened, or if we need to change our thinking and make a better prediction next time. In the afternoon of the very same day that I put the magic finger on the Gregg family, Mr. Gregg and Philip and William went out hunting once again. This time they were going after wild ducks, so they headed toward the lake. In the first hour they got 10 birds, and the next hour they got another 6. "What a day!" cried Mr. Gregg. "This is the best yet." He was beside himself with joy. Just then 4 more wild ducks flew over their heads. They were flying very low. They were easy to hit. Bang, 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 bang went the guns. The ducks flew on. "We missed," said Mr. Gregg. "That's funny." Then, to everyone's surprise, the 4 ducks turned around and came flying right back to the guns. "Hey," said Mr. Gregg, "what on earth are they doing? They are really asking for it this time." He shot at them again. So did the boys, and again they all missed. Mr. Gregg got very red in the face. "It's the light," he said. "It's getting too dark to see. Let's go home." So they started for home, carrying with them the 16 birds they had shot before. But the 4 ducks would not leave them alone. They now began flying around and around the hunters as they walked away. Mr. Gregg did not like it one bit. "Be off!" he cried, and he shot at them many more times, but it was no good. He simply could not hit them. All the way home, those 4 ducks flew around in the sky above their heads, and nothing would make them go away. Late that night, after Philip and William had gone to bed, Mr. Gregg went outside to get some wood for the fire. He was crossing the yard when all at once he heard the call of a wild duck in the sky. He stopped and looked up. The night was very still. There was a thin yellow moon over the trees on the hill, and the sky was filled with stars. Then Mr. Gregg heard the noise of wings flying low over his head, and he saw the 4 ducks, dark against the night sky, flying very close together. They were going around and around the house. Mr. Gregg forgot about the firewood and hurried back indoors. He was now quite afraid. He did not like what was going on, but he said nothing about it to Mrs. Gregg. All he said was, "Come on, let's go to bed. I feel tired." So they went to bed and to sleep. Wonder what those ducks are up to. When morning came, Mr. Gregg was the first to wake up. He opened his eyes. He was about to put out a hand for his watch to see the time, but his hand wouldn't come out. "That's funny," he said. "Where's my hand?" He lay still, wondering what was up. Maybe he had hurt that hand in some way. He tried the other hand. That wouldn't come out either. He sat up. Then, for the first time, he saw what he looked like. He gave a yell and jumped out of bed. Mrs. Gregg woke up, and when she saw Mr. Gregg standing there on the floor, she gave a yell too, for he was now a tiny little man. He was maybe as tall as the seat of a chair, but no taller. And where his arms had been, he had a pair of duck's wings instead. How many of you thought they were going to start turning into ducks or some other animal? How many of you thought something totally different? That's okay. Let's read on and see what happens next. But, cried Mrs. Gregg, going purple in the face. "My dear man, what's happened to you?" "What's happened to both of us, you mean?" shouted Mr. Gregg. It was Mrs. Gregg's turn now to jump out of bed. She ran to look at herself in the glass, but She was not tall enough to see into it. She was even smaller than Mr. Gregg, and she too had got wings instead of arms. Oh, 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 sobbed Mrs. Gregg. This is witch's work, cried Mr. Gregg, and both of them started running around the room, flapping their wings. A minute later, Philip and William burst in. The same thing had happened to them. They had wings and no arms, and they were really tiny. They were about as big as robins. Mama, 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 chirruped Philip. Look, Mama, we can fly! And they flew up into the air. Come down at once, said Mrs. Gregg. You're much too high. But before she could say another word, Philip and William had flown right out the window. Sounds like the boys are enjoying it a lot more than their parents. Mr. and Mrs. Gregg ran to the window and looked out. The two tiny boys were now high up in the sky. Then Mrs. Gregg said to Mr. Gregg, Do you think we could do that, my dear? Well, I don't see why not, Mr. Gregg said. Come on, let's try. Mr. Gregg began to flap his wings hard, and all at once, up he went. Then Mrs. Gregg did the same. Help, she cried as she started going up. Save me! Well, come on, said Mr. Gregg. Don't be afraid. So out the window they flew, far up into the sky, and it did not take them long to catch up with Philip and William. Soon the whole family was flying around and around together. Oh, isn't it lovely? Cried William. I've always wanted to know what it feels like to be a bird. Your wings are not getting tired, are they, dear? Mr. Gregg asked Mrs. Gregg. Not at all, Mrs. Gregg said. I could go on forever. Hey, look down there, said Philip. Somebody's walking in our garden. Who do you think it could be walking in their garden? We'll have to find out tomorrow. Make your predictions in the comments section under the Read Aloud section on our Schoology page, and we'll be back tomorrow to find out who's walking in the Gregg's garden.